This is Aliens and Artists, Episode 9, Part 1 of our talk with Christopher O'Brien. I'm your host, Stuart Davis. Christopher O'Brien is a musician, screenwriter, author, and visual artist. He's also the foremost investigator of cattle mutilations. From 1992 to 2002, O'Brien investigated over 1,000 paranormal events reported in the San Luis Valley, working with law enforcement officials, ex-military, ranchers, and an extensive network of skywatchers. He documented what may have been the most intense wave of unexplained activity ever seen in a single region of North America. His book, Stalking the Herd, is the definitive book on the cattle mutilation mystery. O'Brien's anomalous experiences began around the age of 6 with non-human entities, and have gone on to include dozens of sightings of craft and phenomena.
Well, first of all, I was pretty exceptional as a kid. I learned to read when I was 3, and I could do reproductions of famous paintings with vanishing points and in 3 dimensions. I was able to comprehend pretty complicated and sophisticated chains of events, thoughts. I had a semi-photographic memory. And of course, now I'm a lot, I think I've degraded quite a bit. But back then I had off the charts IQ and which was a blessing and a curse. I was really tired of people just thinking I was a regular, 4 or 5-year-old or 6-year-old and talking to me in Goo voice and that sort of thing. And so I very quickly got a chip on my shoulder about that and was pretty demonstrative about, making sure that adults knew who they were dealing with. My godfather was, for instance, was the person in NASA who was in charge of liaison with Congress for funding during the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, and I would get into arguments with him about the type of funding that NASA was getting. And I said, "You guys are selling yourself short." And I would be in a party situation blowing all the adults away, and then my sister would grab me and take me aside and say, "You can't just lecture people." I was 5, maybe 4. So yeah, I was a pretty mind-blowing little kid, and that allowed me to be really aware, and it I lived with perpetually broadened horizons as a child. And so my parents were very, very careful to shield me from television, from movies that weren't, Disney cartoons or, real super G-rated family films and that sort of thing. And I wasn't allowed to watch TV, read comic books. God forbid they should find a Mad magazine. And so, I led a pretty sheltered life. Now I was adopted when I was 5, and with my brother Brendan, and the night in question was in the spring of '63. I'm not sure if I had turned 7 or I was just about to turn 7. It was right around. I seem to recall it was about the beginning or the middle of March. My birthday being March 24th. And it was just one of those weird things that you it was almost a cookie cutter experience. I woke up, something woke me up, and there was the light. There were 2-foot vertical thin columns of light that were lighting up what appeared to be non-human entities about the same height as me, and they were kind of slightly to the left of my bed, towards the foot of the bed. And, I thought maybe I was dreaming, so I covered up my head with my covers and then brought them down and looked again, and they were right directly at the base, at the foot of my bed. Now, my bed was in the basement. If I stood on my bed, my chin would be at ground level. And just to kind of give you a sense of the, the layout, I lived in a real kind of modern, it was built in the 40s, but the house was quite modern. My dad was a famous architect. My adopted dad was a famous architect, and we lived in a very, like a Frank Lloyd Wright type house with cantilevers, weird angles everywhere, and skylights and all that stuff. This is in Bellevue, Washington. And later on, as I digress here, my paper route was Evergreen Point. So Bill Gates, if he had lived there then, would have been on my paper route. Just to give, I grew up in Medina, which is probably one of the most, hoity-toity elite areas, residential areas in the country. So anyway, I dashed out of my bed. I was not, paralyzed, like oftentimes that you hear about these types of events where people wake up, they see these beings, and they're paralyzed. Well, I wasn't. I was ambulatory. I could move. I dashed out of the room. These little guys were holding these. I called them stickmen later, and these lighted rods that they were holding out in front of them are about, like I said, about 2 feet. They were about 3.5 feet tall. The one in the back, I think there was a fourth one that may have been taller, but it was kind of hiding, and I couldn't see it because the light wasn't shining on it. I could kind of sense movement back there. I ran out the door. I ran up the 10 stairs to the front door landing, and I hit the landing, turned to go up the 4 stairs to my parents' room, which is in the top level of the house, and they were standing at the top of the stairs. And that's when I got my first real good look at them. I don't know if it was the same group, a different group, if they had teleported up there. I got the impression that it was the same group. Since my way was blocked, I had no choice but to run. I don't know why I just didn't run out the front door, but I ran through the kitchen and then grabbed the back door and opened it and ran into the screen door. I had forgotten that my dad had put the screen door on, and that literally knocked me down, made me stumble backwards. I looked through the hallway to the entrance of through the kitchen to the entrance way, the hall, the front hallway entrance, and I could see them behind me. And I don't know why they may have headed me off. This part's a little murky, but once I got outside the kitchen door, I was going to run around the backside of the house on our lawn and bang on my parents' door. They had a dressing room with an entrance to the outside in their wing of the house. And I don't know why, but I ended up running down the driveway, which is kind of headed west towards the lake, and then dashed through there was a big laurel hedge that was between our house and the neighbors. And I thought, well, maybe I can go to the Richards and call my house. And so I ran as quickly as I could in the dark to the Richards house, pounded on their door. Nobody answered, and I looked behind me, and I could see that they had followed me through the hedge. But the Richards had a terrace lawn, so I was above them, and I could only see the tops of their heads, and they were kind of sort of ambiently lit by either a combination of the moon and a big street light that the Richards had next to their house in their driveway. For some reason, I remember seeing the tops of their heads, and they weren't bobbing up and down like they were walking. They were all moving together, gliding, which kind of freaked me out. And so I ran out, since they didn't answer the door. I ran out into the middle of their yard, which is a really big yard, to the Barker's house, in front of the Barkers. And I waited out there to see them when they went under the streetlight, so I could get a really good look at them. And I did. I noticed that their legs were about the width of my thumb now. I mean, they were stickmen. They were like bones almost. They were so skinny with like elastic skin over the bones. They were a dirty white color. I couldn't really tell because of, everything seems kind of white to black when it's pretty dark. You don't really get a sense of color. I don't remember their eyes for some reason. I remember they had big heads, kind of teardrop shaped heads with really small little pointy chins, but for some reason I blocked out their eyes. I've never been regressed or anything to retrieve any memories that I know of. I was regressed one time when I was 13 and was not allowed to know the results of the regression, but that's another story. So I went to the Barkers, pounded on the door. The light came on, the porch light. Later on, Mr. Barker said that he saw me out there. And by the time he, got to the front door, because he had to go out of his bedroom and down the hall into the front door, he opened the door and I was gone. And I don't remember what happened after that. Prior to that, the beings had approached the light, and when I was standing in the yard with lots of room around me to get a good look at them, they had turned sideways and come through the light, and they had no depth. It was almost like they were paper dolls, which that freaked me out. And I went into night terror at that point. Banged on the ran around to the front of to the back of the Barker's house where their door was by the bedroom, and banged on the door. And evidently when he saw me out there, he went and opened the door and I was gone. He immediately called my house, and my sister answered the phone, and she came out in her kind of diaphanous robe and was looking all over for me. And she said she looked about 20 minutes. I think it was longer. I don't know why, but I just have a feeling it was longer. I don't remember anything that happened until she found me huddled on a porch across the street and down. Well, it would have been 1, 2, 3 houses on the other side of our house, so 5 houses away. I thought she was an angel coming down. She was coming down their driveway with the robe floating around her. She looked like an angel. And she took me home, and she knew I was freaked out. She just thought I had a nightmare, that I was sleepwalking. She said I was just babbling, and I wasn't making sense, that I was obviously terrified. And I refused to go back downstairs in my bedroom. So, at this point, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning. And so she says, well, you can sleep in bed with me. And, so she held me, and she said that I tried to nurse her, which I always thought was a really interesting reaction that I had from real primordial fear. So, of course, my folks, my 2 older sisters, my sister Molly, who found me, was 18, adopted sister, and my other sister was 16. And, everybody's, he was nightmare, was sleepwalking, you just had a dream. Well, I read Operation Trojan Horse by John Keel years later and found out there were 2 or 3 other cases just like mine in the neighboring towns to me, the spring of '63. And in one of the cases, the kid even called them stickmen, just like I did. Stickmen with spears is how they had these spears of the light was like zipping up and down inside the sphere. It was all sparkly lights that were jumping around in the spears, I called it. And so that I was, like I said, I was a really, really smart little kid. And that irrevocably changed me. I mean, that was probably the most important event that ever has happened to me. And people say, how can you remember so much detail from something that happened when you were so young, so long ago? I remember it like it was yesterday. The only other things I remember from my childhood is getting, a few, bad beatings from my dad, getting my 2 front teeth knocked out in Little League, breaking my arm, having a couple of really bad wrecks on my bike. I remember the traumatic things, basically, and a few good things. I remember, getting my Raceway 66 HO car scale racing set when I was, 9 or something. But this was, I was totally changed. I became obsessed. Any book that I could find in the library. I went to all the libraries looking for books on UFOs, and I read all the great classics, the Incident at Exeter when it came out, An Interrupted Journey, Vallee's Anatomy of a Phenomenon. Flying saucers have landed. Adamski, Frank Scully. I read all those books, Keel, at a very, very young age. And, but I was in the closet, for all the way until 92. I knew nobody would believe me, so I didn't bother, telling anybody except really close friends, girlfriends, people that I trusted and that knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't confabulate something like this. But I'll tell you, you have an experience like that, you don't forget it.
It's arresting in so many ways. Several questions come to mind. I want to ask later on about why you were not allowed to know what came to light in that regression session. Also, to clarify, is this the event in which your brother had made some comment about a shared dream?
No, this is different. This was about the same time period. I think it was the following year. We used to, because we were like Irish twins, we were 54 weeks apart. We were really close in age, and we both looked exactly alike, almost like twins. So of course our parents would buy us the same exact outfit and dress us all the same. We'd have the same pajamas, the same, basic clothing. They get 2 of everything, which always irritated me, but and him. But we had these blue and white striped pajamas that looked like prison outfits. And I had a weird, this is the only other weird experience that happened to me when I was young, that I can remember. By the time my sister went off to college the following year, we moved up to her room, and there were bunk beds in there. And I was in the top bunk. And I remember waking up because I was hearing this kind of rattling, bumping noise. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked down. Well, first of all, there was this weird green glow that seemed to be coming from outside. And I've never seen a glow like that. I'd say it was green, but it was almost like a color that I've never seen before or since. It was like this weird kind of electric green color. And that's the first thing I noticed. And then the second thing, I looked down to see what the noise was, and it was my dress. We had this little kind of like a chest of drawers, but real skinny, like a bedside table with a drawer in it. And the drawer was floating in and out, like somebody was trying to open it, and the sound I was hearing was the wood hitting the wood of it floating out and kind of bumping on the way out, and then it would go back in and it would go back out. I was like, what the hell? And so I climbed downstairs, and I don't remember why I went down those 4 stairs. The bedroom was up in the upper landing area, the upper part of the split level house, down the hall from my parents' room. And I don't know why I went down there. I think it was because the light seemed to be coming from the front, and we were in the back of the house. And so I went down the stairs to the landing, and then out the landing to the living room. Now we had a 16-foot peaked, like pointed ceiling with 16-foot glass windows and 4 different panes. And they overlook Lake Washington, and we could see the skyline of Seattle across the lake. And I remember seeing this green glow was lighting up the clouds, and these 2 ships came down through the clouds and then started coming straight at me. And they were when they came through the clouds, they were probably about 4 or 5 miles away, maybe out in the middle of the lake. And then when they started coming towards me, they seemed to be right at eye level, because I was up about 100 feet in altitude from the, in elevation from the lake, and they seemed to be skimming across the lake right at me. And I woke up. I don't remember anything after that. Well, my brother, I don't remember telling him this, but I probably did. But, we didn't talk about it for decades. If I had told him, I don't remember, and we had never talked about it until I think it was 89, maybe 88, when I was I lived in a couple of years in Cambridge, in Boston. And he was over at the house one day, and I was, my girlfriend said, tell Katya, who was my brother's girlfriend, tell Katya about that weird thing that happened to you where you saw the ships coming down and then across the lake. And so I told the story, and my brother stopped me as I told I was getting to the end of the story. He stopped me and said, "That was you." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, I thought I had a dream that I was watching myself, but that was you in the blue and white striped pajamas. Remember we had those pajamas? I said, yeah. He goes, I was standing behind you watching the same thing. Now, I don't know if he really was, or if he was unconsciously remembering hearing the story before, but he had goosebumps all over his arms. So, I mean, he definitely was responding to something. I don't know what, but that's the only other thing. I mean, I was always out sky watching. I was always out constantly looking. I was, I think, healthily obsessed with, spotting something during the daytime, especially. So I always was looking, and I always have been looking all through my life. People say, well, how come you've had so many sightings? And I said, because I look. Most people, their eyes don't go above eye level. They're looking straight ahead or down. That's it. I'm always looking around, man. When people say, well, they always come out of the west, I immediately turn around and start looking in the east.
Yeah.
If they say, keep your eyes to the sky, I immediately put my ear to the ground. It's just the way I am. So those 2 events, I think, are the only ones really that I'm conscious of, have conscious recollection of. I may have seen one thing, but I don't know. I think I was just psyching myself into thinking that I saw something. I'm not sure if I really did. It seemed like something was going, was above the clouds, and I could see it go where there was gaps in the clouds. But I don't know if I really did or not. I don't count that as anything. That was later when I was about 11 or 12.
There was some correlation, I don't remember precisely what it was, with Whitley Strieber's cabin.
Yeah, that was my first real sighting in New Paltz in September 79.
And that was just a few miles from his place.
Yeah, about 5-6 miles away from where he was. I had a friend that transferred from City University up to New Paltz and SUNY at New Paltz, State University at New Paltz, and in New York. And we, I was really into prog rock when I was younger, and Gentle Giant was playing, and it was my only real chance to get to see him because they didn't really tour that much, and so I got a hold of some really good Cubensis Mexicana, psilocybe mexicanas, and but I only had enough for me, my girlfriend, and my brother. Or no, he had some. And the other three of us that were there were 6 of us. The other 3 didn't have any. And we went to the show, and it was definitely trippy. Just for the sake of transparency, I've imbibed in psychedelics hundreds of times. But mushrooms, I was quite an aficionado. I used to grow them and raise them in Washington State in high school and had a thriving business. And I spent more time my junior and senior year in high school tripping than I did straight. So just whether it's, I had a chemist friend who would synthesize pure THC, pure cannabinol, mescaline. So, I was very, very fortunate to have those experiences because they were very instrumental in especially the acid. I would go in and do entire trips in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror, and it saved my life in because of the physical and psychological abuse that I experienced growing up. I was really fucked up emotionally, and my shrink later told me, and I can quote him word for word. He says, "I never thought I would ever say this about any case, let alone one of my patients, but you are the only person that I know of that has successfully diagnosed and self-treated themselves with psychedelics."
Wow.
Successfully.
Wow.
So, yeah, try doing, like white lightning window pane, and everybody else does 1/4 and you do 2 4-way hits and then sit there and get to know yourself real well in the mirror.
Wow.
That's not many people can do that. I was very fortunate. So I, for the sake of transparency, I should fess up. But so anyway, I'm there enjoying this concert. It's one of the best bands ever that I've ever seen live, and I've seen everybody. See, that's one thing about my generation. I did see all the good bands, literally. And so afterwards, we were going to go to this party, but the person that was going to take us to the party didn't go to the concert. So we had an arrangement where we were going to meet him down at the parking lot in the down the hill, the parking lot for the football field, the athletic field. And so we went down there to hang out, and we were hanging out in the middle of the football field, looking up, beautiful moon, moonless night, stars are blazing, and I'm lying on my back, and I noticed that there was a group of stars that seemed to be kind of moving around a little bit. All the other stars were stationary, but these like 6 or 7 stars I could see them slightly moving. And so I went to my brother. I said, "Look straight up. Tell me what you see." So he looked straight up and he goes, "Those stars are moving." I said, "Yeah, I thought so. I thought maybe it was me." And then I went to the people that weren't tripping. I said, "Hey, look over here, right up there. Okay, now look straight up and tell me what you see." And they saw the same thing. They said, "Those stars are moving." And so I said, let's try something. Was it me or my brother? I forget at this point who said it, but I think it was me. I said, let's see if they know we're here. And so I said, let's trace out with our bodies. Let's lie on the ground in a square. And so we arranged ourselves lying down in a square, and the lights in the way up there, like stars, they moved into a square. And then we said, oh, cool. My brother stood with his back to us, and he was looking up as kind of our quick control, so that we weren't thinking that it was something. And an observer who didn't know what we were doing needed to verify that. He couldn't see what we were doing, but he was looking up, and he said, yeah, now they're moving into a square. We did a circle, we did a triangle, and then I tried three wavy lines, because I was doing the symbols for psi experiments, parapsychology experiments, guessing, it's a circle, a square, wavy lines, or a triangle. We had a problem. We didn't have enough people to do the wavy lines. And then somebody said, well, why are you so far away? Why don't you come closer? And all of a sudden the lights, either they were rushing down at us because they were getting bigger and brighter, or they just illuminated, they got brighter. It appeared like they were coming down towards us. And then the same person that said that, it was one of the girls, she says, no, not that close. And they stopped. And then they went back up and just started doing their milling around thing. And that's when our ride showed up, and we just said, oh, time to go to the party. And we went to the party. That was my first real sighting. That's pretty unique. I've never heard of anybody.
I've never heard of that kind of interactive geometrical dynamic. Yeah. I want to pause and ask, what do you make of all these 3 milestone events now, as you reflect back, having had a life in these realms, including so much research and experience? What do you make of these experiences reflecting back at this point?
Well, I don't really, I can't really analyze them or judge them or ascribe any particular significance to them, other than the fact that I think there are certain people that their reality, it's almost like a predestination thing. It's almost like certain people have to be given certain kinds of experiences so that they will go on and do certain types of work or be involved in certain situations that may have some sort of significance. And this is the classic special destiny kind of tag that is in psychology, where someone thinks that they're destined for greatness, or certain important crucial events won't happen unless they're there to trigger them. They think that the universe revolves around them. This would be the only aspect of that particular line of thinking, my own experiences, that would even allow me to entertain that as a possibility. I'm not a person that's particularly, well, I don't believe anything, number one. And I definitely don't believe that I'm some sort of special destiny person. But if I were to think that, these 3 events would be the thing that would make me think that. That and the fact that, my adoptive mother taught me about the divination arts, the I Ching, card reading, pendulum divination, all these things I learned as a kid. How to divine for water. My mother doused my brother's well in, I think it was 91. She came to Colorado and found water for him when he was getting ready to drill his well. And so he had the water company come, and they had their water witch, and they divined the same thing, not knowing that my mother had already done it. And they found the water in the same exact place, except they said it was 6 feet up, closer to the surface, and she had said it was down further, and she was right and they were wrong. But they both hit the right spot. So I mean, that really that had a major influence on me. But these things, I think the main thing that they did was absolutely prove to me in my mind, without any room for interpretation, that we live in a reality that has a lot more going on. There's there's sentience that is operative in our, four-dimensional reality. There's sentience that's operational and is influencing our particular closed, naive sort of existence, and has tremendous capability and sophistication, technology, and is able somehow to become entwined or entangled, if you will. If you want to get into physics here a little bit, it's entangled into synchronicity and into meaningful coincidence. And so, that type of coincidence is what got me to the San Luis Valley. I would not have been there except for the coincidence of moving to Santa Fe from Boston and seeing 3 horrific, 2 pedestrian accidents and 1 car accident. All 3 people were killed. I saw that within a week, and I knew the universe was saying, this is not the place for you.
Wow.
And I had a friend and his girlfriend who lived up in the San Luis Valley, which is about 3.5 hours north of Santa Fe. And I was talking to him on the phone. I was going to go up and visit him. And I mentioned, what was going on. And I didn't feel like I was supposed to be there in Santa Fe. And he said, well, come up here. We got 2 extra bedrooms. Come on up here and check it out. So, we did. We moved up there just to see if we liked it. And I was there for 13 years. And of course, everything that's ensued, all this investigative work and, writing books and shit, I'm zeroing in on 100 different TV show segments that I've been in. Plus I've got, this is off the record. I have a non-disclosure agreement, but I'm going to be working on a show on the San Luis Valley for Discovery Studios. But nobody is supposed to know that. I've already signed a development deal. So all that stuff would not have happened unless synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, had steered me in that particular direction. And other things have happened too along the way that have kind of, I've often joked to the New Agers that, you can't argue with the angels when they point you in a direction. Don't fight it. Don't just it's okay. Go with it.
The resistance becomes more painful than just going ahead with it. It reminds me of a question that I've been struggling with lately, which is about interiority, the sentience that you mentioned, this intelligence interacting with us. Sometimes I wonder if the emphasis on the objectivity and the materials is misplaced. You've had copious encounters with the hardcore reality of mutilations, of course. But I also wonder if the interiority in trying to engage and understand these phenomena, is that a capacity that we can cultivate, that we should cultivate, that interior sensitivity?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we have much of a choice, because I think what may be behind this whole idea is Gaia. I think that the planet itself is a superorganism, and we are the cream of its spawn. We are the thing that will take our genes will, like a dandelion blowing in the wind, our genes will be spread out to the cosmos. And I think the planet's trying to get us off the planet because we're detrimental to the wonderful biodiversity that's here. And we are, us and our cows in our cars and chainsaws. I think it was Jeremy Rifkin said, or no, it was Lovelock, the guy who came up with the Gaia hypothesis, said the 3 most detrimental things in our reality are cars, chainsaws, and cattle. The 3 C's. I think Gaia is trying to trick us off planet So I think one of the possible rationales for using aliens and things that's seen in the sky, mandalas of completion, as Carl Jung would say, I think part of that is to draw us off planet, to get us out there to see the stars, so that the sanctity of this closed system of biodiversity can be healed. And so I know that sounds kind of weird,
Not to me,
but I think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's a very real possibility. I don't think we're dealing with aliens from another planet. Not even close. I think that is the least likely explanation to explain meaningful coincidence, this kind of quantum entanglement of thoughts, ideas, and cultural biases, and cultural motivation. I think there's a thermostat culturally that's operational. Jacques Vallée talks about this a lot, that that when things heat up, something has to come to cool it down, whether it's you want to talk about physical science. If we get too hot and we have global warming, boom, we're going to probably have an ice age to offset it. Everybody's worried about global warming and climate change. Yeah, we're probably going to go into an ice age as a result of creating too much heat on the planet. Once we stop the conveyor belts of water coming up from the cold Antarctic regions up to the Arctic regions, like the Gulf Stream and the Pacific Gyre, if the water gets too warm and it gets desalinized, those conveyor belts will stop. And once that happens, then the Arctic areas will start to creep down, like they did over and over again, the last million years.
On the theme of Gaia, or a more animistic interpretation of this sentience, how does that factor into something like the hybridization program that's been reported for decades? I know you're familiar with John Mack's work. How do you feel what you just shared comports with the hybrid topic?
Well, just the whole idea of contact and the details of that, whether it's hybridization, whether it's some sort of genetic manipulation for whatever purposes. I don't think we have enough empirical evidence to support that. I think that those might be the signposts that are suggesting an interaction, trying to change humanity in a way that further tricks us to get off planet. I think these are all just sort of steps on the way towards colonizing the stars. I don't think, for instance, that these experiences are coming from outside of this, mostly closed system called Earth. I don't, or Gaia. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think what we're seeing is trickery. That's why I wrote a book on the trickster. I think we're being tricked. I think none of this. You can't accept any of the of these types of details or elements in the narrative. You can't accept them at face value. If they tell you that they're from another star or planet or whatever, they're tricking us. That's why earlier in the game, in the 50s, in the late 40s into the early 50s, these beings were from Venus or Mars or Jupiter or Uranus. And then slowly, as we became more sophisticated scientifically, they all of a sudden they would come from other star systems and then other galaxies. So, in the technology that we're seeing of going from nuts and bolts, big airships with sails and steam engines in the 1890s, gave way to mandalas of completion in the Jungarian description, Carl Jung. And now we're seeing, more sophisticated technology. The tricking process that's going on is couching itself in technology that's slightly ahead of where we are at that point in time. So they're not giving us something that is beyond our ability to at least comprehend and identify it. They're just leading us along like a carrot, in front of the horse or the donkey, and I don't really think that we're seeing. I haven't seen any evidence, not one shred of unassailable evidence, unequivocal evidence that we are being, number one, visited by aliens from outside this closed system, and number two, there's some sort of manipulation going on in the physical realm of science and genetics and that whole thing. There's one thing that throws a monkey wrench into that theory, and that's the cattle mutilation phenomenon. That's why I'm so really involved in trying to get to the bottom of that, because I think that's the one thing that may be the key to all of this, because it's biology. It's thousands of pounds of physical evidence, and so I don't buy into the the John Mack, the David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, Kathleen Martin. I could go down the list of all the, even all the way back to Leo Sprinkle, who was one of the first people that recognized me for my work. Leo was the one that really was the first guy to start regressing people. He's still around. He's in his 90s. But he regressed the owner of Snippy the horse, and back in the mid 60s. He kind of brought in the whole Dolores Cannon, Barbara Lamb, the New Age kind of, the Space Brothers are here to save us and to improve our, spank us when we're bad in a giant, kind and gentle way, but they're here to solve all our problems for us. I don't believe that is no way. There's nothing outside that's going to come here and solve all our problems for us. I don't think they're going to come here and eat us and use us as cattle either. So I'm a pretty progressive guy when it comes to social and political subjects and things and scenarios. But when it comes to this subject, these kind of fringe subjects, I'm very conservative. I don't like to leap beyond what the empirical evidence will support. And we don't have any empirical evidence that supports genetic manipulation. We don't have any empirical evidence that suggests that people are actually being taken up and aboard ships. I had a Native American, the head of Department of Public Safety in Dulce for 30 years. He was being trained by his grandfather to carry on his clan's medicine lineage. And he asked the grandfather, he said, "Grandfather, what are these silver ships that we're seeing? And what happens? Are people actually being taken up out of their bedrooms into these ships?" And his grandfather did this. Now I'm trying to illustrate this because he only said one word or one phrase, but he stopped his grandson, Hoyt Velarde, and said, "Shut up." And then they were sitting at a table and there was a salt shaker in front of him. And he grabbed the salt shaker and he picked it up and moved it to the side and banged it on the table. And then he took his hands and then raised them up out of the table upwards, like something coming out of the table where the salt shaker used to be. And then he slammed the salt shaker back in its spot. Wow. And then did a chop over the top of it and said, "Nay," which in Apache or Dene means "don't ask me again." I love that. So, and I said, "Well, Hoyt, God, man, that's pretty interesting. What did you take that to mean? And he said, very simple. He says, when someone is taken aboard a ship, they don't go up through the wall and out up in the sky into the ship. The ship forms around them. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah. Well, to me, it's like something's coming up out of the ground. It's kind of how I interpreted it. And then the experience happens, and then they close the door. There's a door opening. It comes out and encompasses you in the experience. The experience ends, and then bam, the door closes. That's kind of my interpretation of it. But he would know better.
Very interesting. There are reports of a type of co-location phenomenon in which some of these craft are apparently permeably interfacing with someone's home structure or a room.
Yeah, consciousness. Yeah, I agree.
For more on Christopher O'Brien, visit ourstrangeplanet.com and ufodap.com. And now, a poem by Greg Delanty. Greg Delanty is the author of several books of poetry. He's the recipient of the Austin Clark Award, the Alan Dowling Poetry Fellowship, a Guggenheim Grant, and the Patrick Kavanagh Award. He is the poet in residence at St. Michael's College in Vermont. The Alien. I'm back again, scrutinizing the Milky Way. Of your ultrasound, scanning the dark, matter, the nothingness, and now, the heads say, is chock-a-block with quarks and squarks, gravitons and gravitini, photons and photinos. Our sprout. Who art there inside the spacecraft? Of your Ma, the time capsule of this printout. Hurling and whirling towards us, it's all daft. On this earth, our alien who art in the heavens, our Martian, our little green man, we're anxious to make contact, to ask divers questions about the heavendom you hail from, to discuss the whole shebang of the beginning and end and the pre-Big Bang untime before you forget the why and the lie of that first place. And, our friend, to say welcome, that we mean no harm, we'd die for you even, that we pray you're not here to subdue us, that we put away our ray guns, missiles, attitude, and share our world with you, little big head, if only you stay. Greetings, terrestrial wonder spindles. Stuart here. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please go to stuartdavis.com and become a patron. Just click on the Patreon button, and in no time at all, I will have all the bail money an artist could want. When I'm within you, when I'm within you, when I'm within you, I'd have become you, I'd have become you, I'd have become you, a wandering destroyer. Heaven drops a bomb between my ears, squeezes
freezes all that fire into a spear and throws it at my fear. Out of mercy, let a mystery lead, let it lead us into storms where the lightning bolts are born. Out of mercy, let a mystery turn our faces to the sky. Let the light, then let the lightning strike the eye. Yeah. Out of mercy, out of mercy, out of mercy. So when I'm within you, when I'm within you, when I'm within you, I to become you, I to become you, I to become you. This mystery holds us like a, this mystery threads us like a, this mystery holds us like we're gonna wander right into it. One mystery holds us like a, this mystery threads us like a, one mystery holds us like we're gonna wander right into it. We're gonna wander right into, I'm gonna wrap my arms around you. We're gonna wander right into, right into, right into, yeah, right into a storm where the lightning bolts are born. Out of mercy, let a mystery turn our faces to the sky. Let the light, then let the lightning strike the eye. Yeah, yeah. Out of mercy, out of mercy, out of mercy. This mystery turns us into smoke. Weightless weight. This mystery turns us into smoke.